Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be discussing streamlining project intake and prioritization with Project Online. My name is Doug Welsby, and I'm the channel manager here at Microsoft. I'm joined by my colleague Jim Patterson and Matt Willey. During today's webinar, attendees will be on mute, and the line will not be open for questions. However, please feel free to use the GoToWebinar question feature to submit questions. I'll address these questions during the webinar, and we'll respond via email if we do not get to your specific question. If for some reason you get distracted or pulled away from the webinar, no need to worry, as I will be emailing a link to the presentation once it has been posted to our YouTube channel. I'll now turn the presentation over to Jim, who will be handling the webinar.
Thanks, Doug. I really appreciate the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your valuable day to join us. Our topic today is streamlining project intake and prioritization with Project Online. And with the topics that we're going to cover today, they should include capturing project proposals and the ideation process within Project Online, looking at topics like evaluating resource capacity as we're making decisions in that realm, including financial planning, including things for CapEx and OpEx. And then doing project prioritization and selection, ultimately choosing out of that broad range of ideas and requests, which ones we actually want to do. We will be talking about some of this stuff conceptually and some of the factors involved in this subject matter. And then we'll follow up with a live demonstration. And Matthew Willey, my counterpart, will actually be demonstrating these concepts live in the software. These solutions are here available to you today. And implementable in a relatively simple fashion. And we'll finish up with a summary and a wrap up and some special offers for those of you that have registered and attended here today. So with that, let's get started. You know, always going to start with kind of a 101 type of definition. And what is project intake? Well, it is really like a funnel for your projects and initiatives, and it represents really the earliest stage of a project lifecycle. It's a funnel for consideration, evaluation, selection of projects and other work efforts. And the idea is to take maybe this broad set of things that are suggested to us that we might want to do and figuring out what we should do and what we can do based on financial and resource constraints. It also gives us the ability to capture the needed information and justification that we might need to make an informed decision as we decide which ones we're actually going to embark upon. And then also, we need to understand and establish what it's going to take to accomplish these things should we choose to do them. Now, we don't want to do these things unless there's an expected business or commercial benefit to the company. And the idea there is making sure that we factor in that dimension of the request or the idea in the decision-making process. Ultimately, we want to incorporate also a process for approval and governance. So the idea is it has to be submitted. It has to go to the right people. It has to get to the right eyeballs. And then it must go through whatever vetting and governance process in an organization that's there in order to have it come out the back end as an approved and funded effort. Well, how do organizations do this today? Well, unfortunately, many of them are still doing them in ways that have been around for a long time. Some are using business case or project request type of Word documents and putting them up on file shares. The problem with that is it may be fairly robust and capture the data points you want, but I liken a document to a capsule that once you close it, that data is really not available and readily available to you on an easy basis. And the idea is we want something maybe more shareable and more universally usable in that mode. People in that same file basis are also using things like Excel and using complex spreadsheets with different dimensions of data in order to make those things happen. Once again, it's a standalone static model, and it doesn't really lend itself to the right kind of sharing and collaboration and even data analysis that we're looking at across the board, across all requests that we're making. Some people are actually just using email requests and submitting requests. Somebody has to then take those and resubmit them somewhere or distribute them to people. And it makes for sometimes a disjointed and less than efficient process. People are also using things like general collaboration tools, whether it be things like SharePoint or Confluence and things like that out there to actually make submissions and get them done that way. Some people actually do requests strictly on a financial basis and through their financial or ERP systems. And the idea there is that it's once again separate and distinct from probably where we're going to be running these projects and these efforts ultimately. A process for approval and governance, when it does that, doesn't necessarily have its best outcome when you're doing standalone documents and emails. And these other methods that we're using, the other downside to them is they're not connected to the eventual project and portfolio and execution solution that we're going to be using. So meaning it's a separate artifact off to the side. So ultimately, if we do that, we end up with kind of silos of information and different packets of data. So in that silos of information allows, it prevents us from having a streamlined process. Some of the downsides to that is we end up oftentimes with duplicate entry of data as we go through different stages, different documents and spreadsheets. The same data points are being entered multiple times by the same users or different people when we could be actually making use of one source of entry and multiple uses of the data. And as we go from those different sources, we could end up with data loss as things in one document or spreadsheet may not make its way over to the next document and spreadsheet. When we do this, and there's disconnected tools and processes, what we can end up with is unclear and competing priorities, version control, nobody understanding whether or not they're actually looking at the most recent version of the information. And then inconsistent processes means different routing and different approvals, and who gets to get involved in that can be inconsistent at best. The other piece is once they get submitted, we often have lack of visibility into where the submissions stand in the process. What's the status? How far have they made it? Has somebody even looked at it and reviewed it? And then when we have these things in separate methods that may be different in their nature and form and format, it makes it hard to compare and prioritize business cases and submissions, which ultimately can slow down the approval process. The other thing that's hard to do with this standalone and static document-based method is to get consistent evaluation and benefits assessment across all initiatives and all proposed projects. So, we want to try to get to consistent and integrated ways of working in this realm. So for example, a centralized database repository is key. Having it integrated with an eventual project and portfolio execution solution that we're going to manage this approved project in gives us an end-to-end continuum for this data, and being able to use data that was entered very early on later on in the execution portion. Also, forms-based data capture. Instead of documents where this data is locked up and away, forms basis with a database on the back end allows us to use and analyze this data in a number of different ways, as we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we can include all the elements in this type of capture for even a full, robust business case, things that we have even in multi-page Word documents today. The other piece is it allows us to use conditional things for templates. So if we have different initiatives that are of different project types or even of different complexities, might not require as robust an intake process, we can accommodate those different methods as we go on through. And we can also accommodate through this approach all stages of an intake funnel, whether it be an initial idea to where it becomes a full-blown request, all the way to maybe larger capital projects that require full-blown business cases. The funding and approval process that's required, and then transitioning this to execution so that it actually moves nicely on an automated fashion into the tools that we're going to execute in. It also gives us the ability to capture all the elements in one place. And this picture of a file cabinet is really going from that file-based or even document-based types of approach into the cloud, and maybe moving into that where we can in one place, in one data set or set of database repositories, give a full description and characterization of the request, make some assertion or a designation of the strategies that we may align with, to be able to put in the resource estimates and plans of what it's going to take from a resource perspective, so we have that data point to make decisions. Financial estimates, what budgetary things it's going to need to actually make that happen? Is it capital or expense money that we're actually going to be using? The benefits, what are the benefits we're going to achieve? Are they commercial or financial benefits? Are they more process or other types of efficiency types of benefits and cost savings we're looking at? Those things should be captured there as well. And then any information about the way we're going to prioritize and score this should also be captured as well. And we'll talk about what that is in a little bit. Also, different project types may have different data elements that are required and different levels of rigor in that approval process. So workflow for routing and approval should be included so that we can follow that continuum from initial demand or idea all the way through portfolio management, the financial management aspects, the resource management aspects, and the project execution. And this means not just the initial estimates, but through then what the forecasting is throughout that, capture of actuals as we execute and track those projects as they come online. So when we look at Wickersoft solutions today, we're doing a lot of things in the Microsoft Cloud and much of it in Project Online today. And Project Online at its core does provide some capability for demand management, budgeting and cost management, portfolio management, project management, collaboration, et cetera. But what Wickersoft is doing is innovating a lot to do things to speed that up, get quicker time to solution, and adding some value-added capabilities to enhance even what Project Online does with its robust capabilities. So for example, we have our one PPM, which seamlessly puts these pre-configured standards in place so that we can actually get going very early on with best practices in the areas and all these different stages in the life cycle of a project. We also have robust reporting and report packs. Microsoft provides some, but we actually extend that and allow us to report on even further elements that Matthew's going to show you here today. We also have our One Connect, which is integration as a service with productized connectors. So even though we talked about maybe financials and ERP isn't a good place to do this by itself, we may want to connect with that to get data that does exist over in those solutions and do that very easily and seamlessly without a lot of data gymnastics, as I like to call it, and manual effort to make that happen. And then using our One Plan solution, which is seamlessly embedded in Project Online, allows us to do things like additional top-down budgeting capabilities and benefits realization, be able to do drag and drop ranking and capacity planning and those types of things. So the idea is you'll see some things today completely embedded and fused with Project Online so that it actually enhances, and to the degree that you need these capabilities, you can actually put them in place fairly readily. So if we look at the ideas, requests, and business cases, we're really looking at intake forms and business cases and really capturing the data elements that are important to you. So anything you're capturing in a data in a spreadsheet today, it's not a stretch to say we can capture all those things online, including time-phased data. So by having a single location, possibly a simple idea capture things to not dissuade people from actually submitting an idea by making it too complex, but actually having it promote to say a full project request or business case, and then opening up different elements of data that are required as it progresses. Because we may early vet things out early in the cycle of looking at these requests. I use the example a lot of, I might get 500 requests, of which 250 of them I might dismiss out of hand as no, we can't do that. And then the other 250, we might invest additional investigation to make it a formal request. And depending on the nature of it or how far it gets or the complexity or the nature of it, whether it's a capital project or not, a full business case might be required, and different data elements may open up for that. And different tab forms or different data types are things that are inherent in this type of solution with automated workflows, and be able to promote these ideas into actual projects in your portfolio in Project Online. The resource planning side of things, being able to really effectively and easily right within Project Online, put detailed time phase resource estimates in, and this data can be used from the idea stage all the way through as we manage and track it through execution. It can be done very flexibly in full-time equivalents, percentages, or hours, and we can look at existing demand and commitments as you're planning to see what we've already committed to before we even decide to even pursue this any further. On the financial side of things, we can actually get down to detailed, flexible cost types and categories, from original estimates in these ideas and requests, to the budgets that we approve, to the revised forecasts as we actually execute, and even the actuals tracking as we're capturing time, say, against these financials. And then these are all time-phase pieces of information, so we can actually track this when we expect to incur those costs and or those benefits. And actually the labor planning you do in the capacity planning can actually, in the resource planning, can actually drive the cost on the labor side of things. And on the prioritization and alignment, those of you that are familiar with Project Online, all the data that we're going to capture through these enhanced capabilities are fully usable and support Project Online's native portfolio analysis capability in there with its efficient frontier modeling. But we also add other weighted scorings, rankings, metrics, and things like WSJF, weighted shortest job first for Agile. But we also add drag and drop prioritization. So instead of the method that's used natively in there, we can supplement that and enhance it by being able to do kind of a more agile-like process of looking at those scorings and actually doing forced ranking and dragging those things based upon where we think they should be. And we can even do that through a portfolio view, like you're looking at here on the screen, or even maybe with some portfolio level Kanban style planning with cards, etc. Ultimately, we can do this as what if analysis and not impact the actual production data you have for your projects. And while we're doing this, and as we're doing prioritization alignment and we're checking alternatives, we can actually see on a split screen the resource impacts, financial impacts, and how the timeline or the roadmap is impacted as well. Ultimately, you got to have data visualization and analysis. In order to really make good decisions, you have to look at where these things stand, and having actual reports and dashboards that actually look at those things, analyze the requests or ideas that are coming in, and look at the elements that are most important to you, and really turn that raw data that we're capturing into true decision support information that we can use. So ultimately, those are some of the concepts here that we wanted to talk about today on that intake process. I think it's going to come to life even more when you look at Matthew actually demonstrating it live and showing you capabilities that exist today.
Thanks, Jim. Alrighty, so to show that here, I'm logged in here into Project Online. Project Online is part of the Office 365 experience. It's just one of the applications here, and it works really well with all of the other applications. I'll show a little bit of Power BI today, but it also works in conjunction with OneDrive, meaning if I was to upload a document in Project Online, I can access it through OneDrive. It ties into Teams as well as into Skype for Business, et cetera, et cetera. So logged in here, looking at the homepage, there's some quick links to some different things here. For example, if I click on my ideas, we can start out these requests as very lightweight ideas where we just capture a very minimal set of information. For example, if I was to click into one of these, and or if I was to hit the new button to create a new one of these, it's going to ask me for some standard information that we can come in and track to kind of get the process going, to kick this off, right? So what type of a project is it? Well, it's a mobile project. Who is it being requested by? Daniel Williams. Is there an executive sponsor aligned? You know, so on and so forth. And we can also start to capture some basic prioritization information here as well. So we can start to do some scoring and or you can allow for things like star ratings, so people can actually come in and vote on these. Goal here is that the more value, higher value types of ones are going to, you know, bubble their way up towards the top. And as Jim mentioned, you know, many of these requests and or ideas that come in may never actually turn into real projects. They may, you know, either be on hold for a long time. You know, we're not going to do them now, we may do them a year from now or something like that, and or possibly never happen. And so what this can allow you to do is have a place for those ideas and requests to come into and incubate and, you know, go through the first phase of this. I look at it like a funnel. We might get, you know, 1,000 ideas, 100 ideas, whatever it might be. This is the first part of that funnel. From here, you could flip this into a data sheet view, so more like an online Excel spreadsheet. So if I was the one who's actually monitoring this, getting notifications as new ones come in and such, I can come in and I can quickly make changes to things as needed. For example, go, actually, I think the risk of this is high, and make those updates and, you know, do that in more of a spreadsheet type of view, which you might be more familiar with. Just makes it quick and easy to make some quick updates to these things as needed, assuming you have permissions to do so. So from there, we have these different, you know, requests coming in or ideas. And if we're ready to move them on to the next stage, and, you know, we're not necessarily saying, yes, we're going to do it yet. We're just saying, we're interested. Let's do a little bit more planning and figure out if and when we can do this. Then you can use the Create Project button here, and that will move it to the next stage. It'll move it in as a project, but as a requested project still. At that point, we still haven't yet approved it. Just moving it on into the next stage. So from there, you know, I'm funneling things down. Now we have kind of a smaller list of items, and I can come into those items and I can now start to go and build them out a little bit more, build out the business case, build out a high-level resource plan and a budget over time of what I think it's really going to take to do this project. So I'm adding more information into the mix, basically. So at this point, maybe I need to fill in, my portfolio description and a value statement of here of, what this is actually going to do. Maybe I want to align this to a particular strategic theme. Anything that we already filled out, like some of those prioritization metrics and such, they would come across. So it's not like we have to retype in anything that we had already put in the initial idea and or request. But we can come in and we can complete more information around this and really start to build that out. What one plan lets us do, as Jim mentioned, is really do some high-level top-down resource planning and financial planning that we're going to be able to then utilize to figure out, when can we do these things within our constraints, meaning we only have so many resources, we only have so much budget. How can we fit this all in and really build out a timeline and or roadmap of all these different projects that we need to do? So what you're looking at here is I can come in and I can build out a high-level resource plan. You can start with just generic resources. Maybe I don't know who is going to work on this project yet. I just know I need an infrastructure resource and a developer and so on and so forth. And then you can do that planning either in hours, in percents, or FTEs. So if I flip this to percent, I could say, I need 100% or 400%, meaning 4 developers, so on and so forth. FTEs, that would show 4 people that I'm asking for of that particular role. But you can also, if you do know who you're going to probably be working with, like I know it's probably going to be Daniel Williams, I can start with that as well if I do, especially if I have smaller pools of resources and such, and I know who I generally work for certain types of things. So anyway, you can come in, you can build out that high-level resource plan, and we now understand that, okay, here are the amount of resources you're going to need, the types of resources you're going to need, and for how long you're going to need them for. And we can build that all into our high-level resource plan here without having to go and build like a detailed project schedule with hundreds, maybe even thousands of tasks at this point. Just high-level top-down resource planning. From there, I can go and I can build my budget. The first piece of my budget here is my labor costs. And so based off of the resource plan that I had built, I can actually hit the little import button here and it will calculate out my labor costs for me based off of blended rates by role. So I don't have to kind of manually calculate that all myself. That all rolls up and gives me my labor costs. From there, I can key in any other costs. As simple as, I have a contract in April that I think is going to be about $15,000 and so on and so forth, software, other. And this is all configurable. So we could configure this so it would have the different types of categories of costs that you're looking for. So this can map to how you track and break up and bucket out your different costs. Notice we can also break this out into capital expenses and operational expenses. And so we can tag that back for more accounting, finance type purposes to break this out so we can, especially when a lot of people have separate capital budgets from operational budgets, this can help to track to that as well. So from there, I've added in some business case information on the value side of things. I've added in my resource plan, my financials. And if you choose to do so, you can also put in benefits and or in this case, I have it configured as revenue. How much revenue do I think I'm going to get from this project and or cost savings or those types of things, depending on how we set this up, right? And all of that is going to go into the intake process so we can start to try to make some better decisions and come up with a plan of how we're actually going to go and execute on this project. So switching roles here, now I'm going to be more of a portfolio manager or manager, someone who has to figure out how we're going to do all of these projects, when can we do them all, and even should we do this, right? Or should we not do this, and try to go through that exercise and figure out what are the best things to go and do up front here in the near future. And so what I've done is I've flipped into the portfolio analyzer view here, and I'm going to make this full screen so we have a little more room to work. And so this is a list of all of the different projects that are coming in. Notice some of them are already active, some of them are proposed. So we can, when we're doing this analysis, include the in-flight projects. So we're not, so we're making sure we account for that within the budget constraints and resource constraints that we might have. But we could make a decision, for example, to put one of these active projects on hold, or kill it altogether if it's not going well and we have other higher priority things coming in. That might be a decision that we might end up making. But really the first part of this process is doing some prioritization. And so what I can do here is I can pick and choose which metrics I want to use for prioritization. In this case, I have an Agile metric, WSJF. here, and I could sort this, for example, to put the ones with the highest WSJF at the top. But I can also pull in other metrics, more traditional things, prioritization scores. I might want to pull in, for example, ROI, if I wanted to do so, so on and so forth. And so you can pull in whatever information into the view that you want to come in and be able to make the choices on what should I do, when should I do it, so on and so forth. So based off of that, I could just do simple sorts. I could just click this and sort and say the project with the highest ROI, that's going to be my #1 most high priority project, and so on and so forth from there. It can be as simple as that. But most people don't just want to come in and sort based off of the metrics that are there. Most people want to have some control over it. They want to do some dragging and dropping. And so what I can do here is I can flip into my prioritization view. And what this allows me to do is just that. I can drag and drop while looking at this information to try to make some good objective decisions. But for example, this project here, even though it doesn't have that high of ROI and the WSJF is pretty high but not the highest, I know that our CEO is telling us we have to do that, and we have to do that soon. So maybe I need to drag that up to be, the #1 project here in my prioritization scenario, right? So I can simply just drag and drop these around and get these in the right order that I want, based off of, information that I know as well as the information that's provided here in the views and such. And that's all and great. Now we know, okay, this is the highest priority project, #2, #3, and so on and so forth. But what I have to then do is figure out when can we get these things done within our constraints. People are asking them for them to be done at certain times, but that's not necessarily when we can do it. So meaning you can see here, this is when people are asking for them to be done, and a lot of this overlaps that could cause problems for us. So what do I mean by that? Well, I can come in here and I can pop out my resource plan, for example. And so from a resource perspective, are we going to have any issues? And you can see that, yes, if we do nothing, if we change nothing, we are absolutely going to have some resource issues. You can see here there's some red. And why is there red? Well, I can expand into that, and I can see that's because this particular resource, or in this case, team of resources, is being asked to be used on multiple projects at the same time, full time, and that's creating some over allocations. So then I got to come in here and figure out how to resolve that. To resolve it, you have a couple different options. One option that you have is you can say, well, what if we just don't do some of these lower priority projects altogether? And so what I can do is I can uncheck those projects. And this is all just what if. I'm not actually changing anything in the system. But when I uncheck that, it's going to recalculate down below. You may have seen it really quickly there, reload, and notice some of that red is starting to go away as I uncheck things. And so that's one option you have of solving this problem of resource over allocation is, what if I say, well, we just aren't going to do these, or we're going to put it on hold anyway until a later point. So that's a option. The other option you have is you can come in and you can drag and drop these around and start to stagger these a little bit more so that we don't have to work on them all at the same time. And I'm going to switch my view here to say by quarter. You could also look at this, say by year if you wanted, depending on what level of detail you want in here. And I can simply drag and drop and move some of these lower priority ones out, for example, here. And as I do that, you'll see the bottom grid is updating as well. And so what that's saying is I'm going to, just move these things out. We're going to get to them. We're just going to get to them a little bit later. And that's going to help us solve our resource allocation issues. So that's, another way to go and solve these problems. At the same time, our only constraint may not be resources. Our other constraint may be costs, budgets, right? We only have so much money. We're not, we don't have unlimited budgets generally. And so what I can do is, very similarly, I can come in and I can create a target. The target is basically your budget for, all of the different projects that you need to do within a particular period of time. And I can come in and I'm going to recheck some of these so we can see some things here. And so based off of that target, I have $200,000 a month is what this is telling me. And if I was to do all these projects when they're being asked to be done, you can see we're going to have some issues. There's some yellow, there's some red, because you can see we're going to need $300,000, for example, here in February, and we only have $200,000, so that's a problem. So again, I can come in and I can uncheck things, and I can drag and drop to move things around and make adjustments until this goes green, so we can make sure that we're not exceeding our budget constraints either. At the same token, as a business, we may choose to go and make larger investments, meaning what happens if we increase the budget? Maybe we're possibly willing to do that if we know what value we're going to get. We can get these 3 more projects done within this period of time, or whatever it might be. And so notice by boosting my budget to $250,000 a month, a lot of that yellow and red goes away. I'm now pretty close to keeping within my budget. So maybe that's the plan. As you go and build these out, you can then come in and you can save these as scenarios. So I can come in and I can save a new scenario, and then I can come back to those scenarios at any point. Scenario 1 might be that, hey, we're not going to do these 3 projects, or at least put them on hold until a later time. Scenario 2 might be, well, we're just going to drag out these 3 or 4 projects 6 months. So we're going to get to them, it's just going to be 6 months before we get to them. Scenario 4, we're willing to hire more resources scenario 3, we're willing to hire more resources and or increase budget so we can get it all done when people are asking, right? And so instead of people just throwing things at you and all this demand coming in from different places, and even though they may have the budget, we might not have the resources to do it, and so on and so forth. So we can use this to try to make sure before we go in and actually try to start executing on these projects, we at least have a high-level plan of if and when we can do things. From there, once we pick a scenario, we commit that particular scenario. We move those proposed projects onto the next phase. So we're going to move those, say, into active. And that will allow those to then go and start doing more detailed planning and then eventually executing on those projects as planned within those budgets that they asked for and the resources they asked for, and so on and so forth. So that process can then continue on. As we're going through that whole process, there are many different reports and ways that we can visualize and analyze the data and or share this information with stakeholders, with executives, with leadership, et cetera. And so what we're looking at now is a report of all of those different requests and ideas that were coming in that we saw earlier. And we have some key information around these, what type of a project are, what's the priority, what is the funding source, the prioritization score that we saw in there, so on and so forth, and even some cost and benefit type information if we're capturing that. And the cool thing about these reports is everything is connected together. So if I was to click on the critical priority of this donut chart here, when I click on that, it will filter out everything else accordingly and just show now the critical items or high or so on and so forth. And so by clicking and drilling down and dragging and dropping and using the filters and slicers and such, I just want to see all the ones that are coming out of the hardware budget or whatever it might be. You can focus in on the information that you're most interested in and get visibility into that. The next tab here is more of a bubble chart, and so it's comparing the prioritization score versus the estimated benefits. Items that have estimated benefits and prioritization scores are going to show up in the top right corner here. Those are going to be probably my best projects, the ones that we should be focusing on doing sooner than later. Ones that have a lower prioritization score and lower benefits probably are the ones that we should be putting on hold and or pushing out till a later time. And so you can use this to try to make sure you have alignment for the ones that you're selecting based off of that. So different ways that you can come in and look at this information. And that's just a couple of the ways that you can look at this. There's a full portfolio analysis report pack that you can come in and see these things grouped up different ways, say by portfolio or program, et cetera, priorities by portfolio, so on and so forth. And you can come in and do more analysis from a cost perspective, or even compare those different scenarios that I mentioned to you before to each other to see the differences between them. What do I get if I make that extra investment or not? So on and so forth. So there's lots of different ways you can visualize this information, get visibility, and then share that with others through these different reports as well. So with that, hopefully you can see how you can track and manage this process all the way from start to finish while accounting for both budgets and resources, or one or the other. You're not required to do both by any means. If you just care more about resources and not finances, you could do that, or vice versa. And work all the way through that process as well as getting visibility and reports into it as you go. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Jim for just a couple more slides, and then we'll let you guys go for the day.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for the great demonstration. As Matthew walked us through, there's some great things inherent tied in with the Project Online environment where we can capture very flexible business cases, ideas, and requests. We can actually We've done them in other webinars. It can fully support Microsoft's automated portfolio analysis capabilities, which is using efficient frontier modeling. But if people want more hands-on, more what-if analysis, drag and drop capability, we can actually add that into the mix and provide those capabilities using whatever metrics and guideposts make the most sense for you in that intake and selection process. And by being able to add the level of detail you need from a resource capacity planning and financial aspect of that request and or business case, it really gives you some robust capabilities as you go through the analytics and look at the reportings and slice through these things to make good informed decisions. So hopefully you saw that today. A little bit about how Wickersoft can help you in this regard. We are a full service firm that provides both advisory consulting. We provide solutions like the ones you saw today, which make and enhance the user experience and meets the requirements of a variety of different organizations. We also have operational services for things like managed delivery. We actually help some people actually manage and administrate the solutions you see here as well. We are well certified with, I believe we now have 7 gold certifications, and we're a global company that provides you the type of support that you need where you need it. Just so you know, we were founded as a joint venture with Microsoft in 2002. So not only are we a technology partner with Microsoft, we're actually a strategic business partner as well. The things we saw today really revolved around the project and portfolio management capabilities within the Project Online platform, but we're doing everything in the Microsoft Cloud these days. Though we do have some on-premise customers, but things to enhance your capabilities within the SharePoint Office 365 platform project like we talked about, even in doing things like in Azure, Agile using Azure DevOps, formerly Visual Studio, or even things like professional services automation that might be available in other capabilities within the Dynamics 365 platform. So if you have needs in these areas or may want to make these things work together through our OneConnect, for example, we can provide assistance. As a next step, if you are interested in what you saw today or maybe want to learn more, we can provide you with a free assessment and roadmap of what it would take you from where you're at today to get you into some of these capabilities, and happy to do that for you on a no charge basis. And also complimentary. We can actually, if you're to the stage where you want to do something serious, we can actually offer you chaperone support through a Project Online trial that might even include the OnePlan capabilities. Or if you just saw the generalized things today and want a more personalized one-on-one demonstration to address specifically your requirements and your needs, we're happy to do that for you as well. To reach out to us, the best bet is to go to contactus@wickersoft.com. You'll get these slides, so you'll have that information. And we also have good website information at wickersoft.com as well as project-online.com. If you like this type of webinar, and we have a whole bunch of recorded webinars that we've done in the past, so on demand, you can go out there and look at a lot of different topics from us. And we always have the next month's schedule for our upcoming webinars if you'd like to register for other things as well. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for spending the time and joining us today. Hopefully you got some value out of this today, and you will be receiving a link to the slides as well as a link to the actual recording of this presentation. Thank you again, and hopefully we'll cross paths and we can assist you in the future.